Prepare to set fire to the index card of allowable opinion. Your daily dose of liberty education starts here. The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here, episode 2492 of The Tom Woods Show with our old friend Corey DeAngelis, who has become known as the school choice evangelist. He is the, public enemy number one of the teachers' unions, of Randy Weingarten. You know, sometimes you can say a lot about a man by his friends, but also by the enemies he attracts. And if that's the case, then Corey DeAngelis is one of the great people in our society. And he is the author of the brand new book released just this week, The Parent Revolution. Now, by the way, before we go any further, I actually have it up on my screen here. The Parent Revolution, Rescuing Your Kids from the Radicals Ruining Our Schools. It is a really quick but absolutely bracing read, because you are reading one of the good guys who has successfully taken on so many of the bad guys. And in our world, we have our victories, it seems like, are so few and far between that to have the chance to read somebody who has racked up one victory after another is quite a relief, and it's good for your mental health. So anyway, Corey, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Tom, and thanks for the kind words about the book.
My pleasure. So let's start with the way you start the book, talking about what maybe the thing that really started to get the ball rolling was the school closures. And because I think that had two consequences, primary consequences. One was the attempt to reopen the schools was resisted at every turn by the teachers' unions. And as you show in the book, some of the teachers' unions were making all kinds of bizarre ideological demands that had to be met before, not health demands, crazy ideological demands that had to be met before they would agree to reopen the schools. That was one, and parents were getting frustrated with that. But the second thing is, by closing the schools and turning to a remote option, parents were now able to see some of what was going on in the schools. They weren't all that happy about it. So I want to start with this. If I were to ask Randy Weingarten about this, she would say, I fought tooth and nail to reopen those schools. How is it possible that she's living in such a different universe? What could she possibly mean?
She has to rewrite history, and she even did this in front of Congress. She lied and gaslighted on her record on school reopenings. I mean, if you were fighting to reopen the schools starting in April 2020, why were they closed for so long? Why did you have places like Chicago still striking in 2022? I mean, Tom's 2 weeks to slow the spread turned into 2 years to flatten a generation at her local affiliate in Chicago. They were threatening safety strikes. The American Federation of Teachers, her union, was threatening strikes in 2020. They called the president's plan to reopen schools reckless, callous, and cruel. They were even lobbying the CDC to make it more difficult to reopen schools in person. Meanwhile, private schools were open. They were doing the opposite. In fact, you had a private school in Sacramento. There was a health order that said schools had to close, but daycares could be open. Because, as you know, COVID's really smart. It knows if you're learning something, it's going to get you. But if not, if you're just sitting in the same buildings, not learning, and it's daycare but not school, then it's okay, you can open up. Well, guess what? There was a private school in Sacramento that rebranded itself as a daycare to fight for the right to serve the needs of their customers, to meet the needs of families and children, whereas the public schools, they were celebrating every step of the way. They were fear-mongering every step of the way. In Chicago, they had an interpretive dance video to protest going back to work. I mean, it was just pathetic. They had a board member vacationing in Puerto Rico while saying that it was too hard to go back to work. Gavin Newsom was crying about Zoom school, saying it was so difficult. The governor of California, while he was sending his own kid to private school. I mean, the hypocrisy was just every step of the way. And what this really goes to show you why I donated or dedicated my book and donated a copy to Randy Weingarten. I dedicated it to Randy Weingarten, the teachers unions, for overplaying their hand and awakening a sleeping giant. And if you want to take Ted Cruz's advice, senator from Texas, he says on the back, ruin Randy Weingarten's day by reading this book. They were extorting funding from taxpayers by keeping the schools closed. It was a hostage-taking scenario. They knew that if they and this is always the case, Tom, you know this, but the schools when they fail for any reason, they blame it on they need more money, right? So they have an incentive baked into the monopolistic system to extract more resources and to blame all failure on getting additional resources. Well, they could do this with the school closures too. They were able to say, well, we're closed and everything else is open because, you know, the $20,000 a kid we're already spending, it's just not enough. We need $190 billion more. And, while we're at it, let's throw in Medicaid for all, wealth tax, other socialist programs, and also police-free schools as well. They actually did this. And you know this because you read the book, you have two eyes and you saw what was happening over the past few years. But that sparked a school choice revolution. 11 states now going all in. You can now take your money wherever you want to go. Public if you want. If you like your public school, you can keep your public school for real this time, unlike with your doctor. But if not, you can take that money to a private charter or homeschool. And so the parent revolution has sparked, and it's the damn union's own fault. And it's absolutely glorious to see this all unfold. And it's documented in the book.
You make a reference in the book to your appearance on Dr. Phil, which must have been rather an interesting episode in your life. But what I find especially interesting about it is that Randi Weingarten refused to be there, even though she had the opportunity. And as you say in the book, apparently there was an effort to reach out to Dr. Phil's people to ask if you specifically were going to be the person on the other side. And then all of a sudden, she's not there. I mean, this is a little bit nuts. And then the funny thing is they call you all kinds of names. But here was the golden opportunity to humiliate you on national television. And for some reason, they didn't want to take it.
They can't. They're cowards. And no union boss at all agreed to go on. They didn't have any union members or bosses go on to the show because they knew their track record stunk on the issue. The private schools were open. They were shopping at grocery stores that were open with kids that couldn't go to school, that were working the grocery stores. You had that same teachers going into those institutions shopping. It was somehow fine to do that, but they couldn't go back to work. And Tom, as an economist, I blame the system itself, not so much the people in the buildings. There were some really bad actors like the union bosses, like Randi Weingarten, who makes over $500,000 a year, and like the hypocrites who are vacationing in Puerto Rico. They were also telling in a private group chat in Los Angeles, they were telling other teachers, hey, if you want to go vacation overseas, it's fine, but please don't show it on social media. It might not look very good. So they knew what they were doing, right? They knew they were being hypocrites. They were trying to hide it. And when it was exposed, families can't unsee what they saw over the past few years. I actually sent up one of these books to Randi Weingarten. I signed it. I posted it on Twitter. A lot of people got on me because I have horrible handwriting. But hey, what can I say? I went to government schools. You can't really blame me. And I can't really use the, oh, I'm a doctor excuse, and doctors have bad handwriting because I'm more like a Jill Biden doctor, not a real doctor. I have a PhD in education policy, not in the important stuff. But so, yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I want people to feel optimistic by reading this book because you're right, we don't get a lot of wins on the freedom front. This is one where we have Milton Friedman's ideas coming to fruition finally. I wish he were alive today. Before 2021, there was 0 states with universal school choice. Milton Friedman's idea where everybody's eligible, no winners and losers. Everybody can take their taxpayer-funded education dollars to the school that works best for them. And the unions are losing it. They've been so drunk on power for so long, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to change course. And so I think these wins are going to continue, but it requires parents and other people in society, freedom lovers, to lock arms and become a new union, basically, the kids' union, the parents and the families. And I think we can win because parents care about their kids more than anybody else, certainly more than bureaucrats sitting in offices hundreds of miles away.
I want to let everybody know, I'm sure you have the dates on your website, but you are actually doing a book tour, a rather extensive one, and you may well be coming to a city near many of the people listening to us right now. How do people find out about that, first of all?
You can look at my Twitter and Facebook. I tweet it out very often. It's a graphic, but my first one's at the Heritage Foundation in D.C. on Wednesday. So it happened this week on the 15th, the day after the release, but it'll also be in Boston for Reason Weekend. Anybody who is familiar with Reason Magazine, they have an event every year. And so I'll be talking on May 17th there. I'll be going to Wisconsin and Michigan, California, South Carolina. I'm talking about maybe going to New Mexico and Washington State and Idaho, and lots of states coming. So just check on my social media and you'll be able to find the launch events.
All right, I'll have those links in the description and also at tomwoods.com/2492. I mentioned that because I want to keep you only for so long because this is the release week of your book and you're running around like a madman. I will say that at least I won't say the name, but a publisher I've used was very down on the author book tour because most of the authors they catered to weren't that well known. And so you'd fly around the country at great expense with very little to show for it. You're very different. I mean, a lot of people know who Corey DeAngelis is. So you've got a lot of interesting stops ahead of you. But so given that, I want to focus, if I may, on those parts of the book that I think, therefore, would be of most interest to people watching this particular program. And so let's start with some of the objections that parents have had to particular kinds of content in the classroom. And we're almost tired of hearing about so-called critical race theory, but that does need to be talked about because if you object to it, you're being told there is no such thing, or you don't know how to define the term and you're just an ignorant parent or whatever. But sometimes you'll be told that you just object to having serious topics discussed. You just want to whitewash American history. And that's not true at all. I just don't want propaganda being fed to my kid, which is what this stuff is.
Yeah, and look, the families want the schools to focus on the basics, math, reading, and writing, not on indoctrination. They want education instead. And the thing is, you've had radical leftists infiltrate the government school system for far too long. The left almost doesn't even need to have kids anymore. They can shape the direction of this country towards a more socialist future just by brainwashing kids, millions of them. There's about 40 to 50 million kids in this government school system, K through 12 each year. And they have access to those young, impressionable minds for 13 years of their lives for about 7 hours a day. And conservatives and libertarians can't fight against that just by having more kids. You need to reclaim these institutions. They are more powerful than Hollywood and just about anything else, I would argue, because they have access to young people and they can indoctrinate them with their values as opposed to your own values. And on average, the radical leftists who control the schools are going to be much more socialist than your average parent, because you may make the argument, well, there's indoctrination happening in all types of schools, and some families might choose private schools that have left-leaning curriculum as well. But on average, when families get a choice left to their own devices, they're going to choose education as opposed to politically divisive concepts. And that's really what has sparked the parent revolution, why parents are so pissed. As Vodi Bakum famously said, we cannot continue to send our children to Caesar for their education and be surprised when they come home as Romans. Well, the good news is, Tom, the parents aren't surprised anymore. They've woken up. They're never going back to sleep. And this is how you shape the future of our country. And more importantly, the future of your own child. You don't want to send your kid to a place, even if they have good test scores, even if they're doing well in math and reading, you don't want to send them to a place that is A-rated by the government, but is failing for your child because it's telling them that they need to dislike themselves because of the color of their skin, or they need to hate their country, or they need to vote for socialist policies in the future and not to question the tyrannical authority of governments. So, whatever your political persuasion, I think school choice is the best solution, especially from a libertarian perspective, because the conservatives are doing some other things in red states. They're doing top-down reform of the public schools, which I happen to personally think is a step in the right direction. They're banning divisive concepts like critical race theory, and they're making content age appropriate, no gender ideology at young ages. But those bans don't even really work. I mean, they're unenforceable. We've had videos come out from so many red states, Texas, Idaho, Tennessee, you name it, where the public school administrators are admitting that even if the state bans critical race theory, they're going to do it anyway. And even if it's not in the curriculum explicitly, they'll just call it something else. They'll call it social emotional learning, or they'll call it mental health services, or they'll just teach through a CRT lens. They'll say, hey, I'm sure you've seen some of the math problems where they inject critical race theory into simple math problems where they are brainwashing kids, even when you might think they're just focusing on the basics. So it's ridiculous. And I think the better solution, though, is the only way you're going to get out of this mess through freedom as opposed to force is by giving the money to the parents, working from the bottom up and creating accountability through foot voting. And so families can take their kids' money to the education provider that works best for them, aligns with their values, and it should create competition for the public schools to up their game on academics, but also to focus on non-divisive concepts, because in their best interest, if you're a school system that is open to competition to the private market, well, you're going to have an incentive not to piss anybody off, whether they're on the left or the right or any type of political persuasion. Your incentive is going to be to focus on what matters to the average parent, which is just math, reading, and writing.
Hey, everybody, quick word from Woods here. It's my goal to have the best supporters program out there, better than anything on Patreon or anywhere else. Support the Tom Woods Show, and not only do you get entry into my no-censorship Tom Woods Show elite group, but you also get the 16-page Tom Woods elite letter mailed to your home every month. Who else is doing that? This is all new material, completely different from the emails I send, and it is red hot. My supporters also get invites to my murder mystery dinner parties that I've been holding around the country. I'll be adding more cities soon to woodsmystery.com. I hold these in penthouse suites at luxury hotels with a beautiful catered dinner. It's a ton of fun. I also invite my supporters to my annual Christmas party, and the higher up you go as a supporter, the more things you get. Some supporters even get a small gift in the mail from me every month in addition to the newsletter. So go check it out, supportinglisteners.com. You will not believe all the goodies at supportinglisteners.com. And my profound thanks to all of you. How does homeschooling fit into this picture?
Yeah, with homeschooling, so for a long time, Milton Friedman's voucher idea was basically the money that would have went to your government school. In the U.S., we spend about $20,000 per kid per year in the government-run school system. That amount has increased by about 170% after adjusting for inflation since 1970. The money doesn't go to the classroom. It goes towards administrative bloat, staffing surges, and union bosses. And so, the money could be used in the form of a voucher with Milton Friedman's idea. A fraction of that, sometimes it's about half, so let's say $10,000, you can use to pay for private school tuition and fees, and that basically is the end of the story. It's a scholarship. But Milton, later on in his life, started to be open to this idea of a multi-use voucher where you don't only have to use it for brick-and-mortar private schools. This opens up the market even more, allows for more flexibility and options on the part of the parents. And now what we call this is not a multi-use voucher. We call it an education savings account, an ESA for short. And that money that would go to your government school goes to a parent-directed savings account or guardian-directed savings account. You could use it for private school tuition and fees, just like a voucher, but you could also use it for homeschool curriculum, private tutoring, special needs educational therapies, textbooks, any approved education provider, which opens up the market much more. You can use it for micro schools. I mean, I talked about this in the book, but the NEA actually put the largest teachers union in the country, put an opposition research sheet on Prenda micro schools out during the pandemic era because they saw that families were they needed something, right? Their government school was closed. It's really an interesting lesson on spontaneous order. When the government isn't providing something through coercion, individuals will figure it out. And they did figure it out when the schools closed by forming something called pandemic pods, 5 to 10 children getting together in households, basically homeschooling, or a miniature private school. But it's like the one-room schoolhouse where families can band together and economize. Maybe you have one parent doing math and another parent doing reading, or maybe you have one parent doing these days a week and another parent doing other days a week. But at the end of the day, Arizona already has a thriving micro school market. Families are using these ESAs to pay for the micro school tuition, basically with the tutor all day. And the NEA saw this as such a threat because they know families liked it so much and they saw the blossoming and support for these one-room schoolhouses. The NEA put an Oppo research sheet on them, just like a political hit piece. And it was only internal at first until the Wall Street Journal editorial board actually got a handle of it. Accidentally, the union sent it to one of the school choice advocates. I guess they didn't. They sent it to the wrong email. That's kind of another separate story. But the headline in the Wall Street Journal was, "This is the teachers' union's tiny little enemy." And it just goes to show you that once parents are left to their own devices to fend off for their kids and to find the best solutions, things can change rapidly. And so libertarians should be extremely excited about this. The teachers' unions caused a mass exodus from the government school system already. We've already had about 1 million kids leave government schools because of the school closures, and homeschooling has at least doubled since pre-pandemic levels with ESAs, education savings accounts. And yes, these are all voluntary. Homeschoolers can choose whether to take the money or not. That should only increase the number of homeschoolers even more. And I want to point out something we talked about on your show last time, Tom, that some of the libertarian argument, and a libertarian argument could be that, oh, well, with school choice, that could lead to government control of private and homeschoolers. My argument is the government can already do that, whether you accept the funding or not, whether you're forced to take that funding to your assigned government school or not. You might as well give families a choice to take the money and to make that decision for their own kids and to make that cost-benefit analysis for their own families. And guess what? With school choice, you create a new organized interest. You create a broader coalition of families benefiting from private and home education. And so if you have, politics is all about organized interest. If you have more people benefiting from private and home education, when those authoritarians want to try to come and take it from us, well, then we'll have a better shot at fighting against those authoritarians in the future if we have more people benefiting from the initiative. And look, in New York City, in New York State, actually, you look at HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association, their website has a map of all the best and worst states for homeschools and how much they regulate. New York has some of the worst homeschooling laws on the books, according to HSLDA. Guess what? They have no private school choice initiatives. Look at Oregon. They outlawed private education altogether in Oregon in 1922. Thankfully, in 1925, the Supreme Court thankfully ruled the child is not the mere creature of the state and struck down that bigoted authoritarian law. And now, but that wasn't because of the school choice program. They did it regardless of whether families had opportunities or not. They took away that power of families to choose. And so with school choice, we got to take the W or else we're going to be stuck with the L. We got to take the incremental wins when we can. And guess what? Randi Weingarten has made the same freaking argument on Twitter. She has said that, oh, this is going to lead to government control of private education. Is Randi Weingarten saying this because she's some anti-government libertarian? Hell no. She's a big government socialist. She wants to keep her gravy train going. And if you're on Randi Weingarten's side and not my side, you're probably on the wrong side. You're not the education freedom fighter that you think you are.
Now, of course, we can talk about the ideological slant in the schools and crazy ideas being taught, but our friend Brian Kaplan, who, by the way, endorses you, I just saw that not too long ago, but he has a book where in which he spends a good deal of attention on just the flat-out results, just saying that these schools just generate very, very bad results. And then I've taken that point and I said I jump into some of your arguments on Twitter. I can't help myself. But I jumped in the other day to say to somebody, look, if Walmart ran the schools and the results were as bad as they are in these schools, you would be up in arms. But for some reason, because it's the government schools, well, it's every excuse in the book about it. You know, drop the double standards. Admit that the system stinks. It's not a question of they're not spending enough money. You got to be kidding me. We're spending more money than anyone has ever spent on anything in the history of the world. You know, so, but is there anything you can say specifically about the actual results of these institutions?
Well, if it was just the problem of the test scores, I mean, it wouldn't be as bad as the ideological indoctrination. But you have in Baltimore dozens of schools 40% of their high schools in Baltimore have 0%, none, no kids proficient in math in Baltimore high schools. 40% of them, dozens of schools. It's totally mind-blowing, and they spend so much money. On average, in the U.S., private school tuition is only about $12,000 per year. You can look it up. But the government schools spend about $20,000, almost twice as much per student per year. It's higher in some place. In New York, for example, it's $40,000 per kid in the New York City public school system. But I mean, the same person that made this argument, Tom, on Twitter, she got ratioed into oblivion. She's an admitted socialist, but she said that, oh, well, public schooling is a public good and test scores don't matter. They don't matter. What matters is that the schools have to serve the interests of the state. I mean, talk about letting the mask slip. They admitted it doesn't matter. It's not about education. It's about indoctrinating kids to be cogs in the machine, to go through the factory model system and to be obedient factory workers. This is why we started the compulsory education system in this country to begin with. In 1930s, you had Horace Mann, the father of public education, who infamously said at one point that he said something like, "Man is iron, but the children are wax." Basically, he wanted the school system to be able to mold the minds of other people's children. And he said it was to be pro-American, whatever that meant to him at the time. But he came from Prussia, which John Taylor Gatto has talked about extensively, modern day Germany, where they explicitly created their compulsory system to create obedient soldiers and factory workers. That is why they made their compulsory education laws in Prussia. And then they brought those fantastic ideas to the great country of America back in the 1930s. And you can see remnants of that happening right now, Tom. With the whole reason we've had the parent revolution is because parents don't want their kids brainwashed. They don't want their kids in schools that are indoctrinating them to hate their families, themselves, and their countries. And so now what you have is a backlash to that. You have a backlash to this sunlight being shown on the intended purpose of these schools for some people, which is to control the minds of other people's children. It's a form of tug-of-war between the teachers' unions and the radicals in power there and the families over the parents' own children. I mean, it's amazing that only like 5% of families homeschool nowadays. That's basically you raising your kids. And so, I think school choice is a step in the right direction because you can kind of facilitate how that's going to work and find people that you trust more to be around your kids for 7 hours a day for 13 years of their lives. But homeschooling and microschooling may be the best way to raise a kid in the way that's aligned with your values, and also to capitalize on the positive forms of socialization. A lot of people say, oh, well, homeschoolers, yeah, they may be smart, but what if they aren't well socialized? Have you seen society today? Have you seen the government schools and politically polarized environment that we live in? Have you seen how there's so much bullying and drugs and gang activity at the government schools? That is socialization, but it's not a form of socialization I think that you want your children to be exposed to. With homeschooling, you can choose sports, you can choose other activities, a micro school, maybe a hybrid homeschool opportunity. You should be able to capitalize on positive forms of socialization, and you shouldn't have to pay twice. People who homeschool and do private school today without school choice, guess what? They're paying twice. So you have to pay through the tax system for the failure factories we call government schools and those dumpster fires, and you have to pay out of pocket. Just imagine if you were assigned to your nearest government-run grocery store and you had to pay for it, and it served you rotten food each year. You were getting food poisoning and you had no alternatives but to pay again or to move houses to be assigned to a better so-called public grocery store. I mean, that is not how markets work. It's not how accountability works. And we saw with this fairy tale model of so-called democratic accountability in the government-run school system, it does not exist, because when parents showed up to say, hey, Why are you brainwashing my kids saying that they're bad based on the color of their skin? Why are you reading sexually explicit content to my children? Guess what happened? Parents had their mics cut off. Parents were labeled as domestic terrorists under the Patriot Act. You had the school board sending a letter to President Biden to investigate parents under the Patriot Act. And guess what? The FBI actually created a threat tag specifically for parents showing up at school board meetings, wanting a say in their kids' education. So that model of, well, public schools are so accountable because you can go tell them you're upset, that doesn't work when you're not a customer. They want to just bully and silence you into submission. Thankfully, their plan backfired, and that just pissed off parents even more and emboldened them to be even louder and to push back in more peaceful ways and to spark a parent revolution that should have Randy Weingarten shaking in her boots right now, because it is the ultimate form of accountability. You need to be able to take your money somewhere else. And guess what? Having that leverage, just being able to show up and say, hey, I can go somewhere else, should reduce the likelihood that you need to leave, because then they might listen to you as opposed to labeling you an evil person or a terrorist.
Hey, everybody, let's take a minute to thank our sponsor, Persist SEO. If you are getting buried by your competition online, then build your brand, your reputation, and your lead flow with digital marketing by Persist SEO. If you are a small local business trying to compete against large companies in the service industry, then increase your visibility with Persist SEO. Or what if you have low or no leads coming in on a consistent basis? Well, then website search engine and conversion optimization can help move the needle to a more prosperous business model for you. Are you tired of cold calling and networking, meeting places getting shut down? Use your website as a lead generation engine. Or what if you're not showing up for your services in the search engines? Well, get found with Persist SEO's expert search engine optimization. All you have to do is call 770-580-3736 or visit them at ineedseo.help for a free website audit and consultation. That's 770-580-3736 or ineedseo.help. Well, in fact, the last thing I want to ask you, it develops that very point. Now, we hear a lot from people who say they believe in democracy, but what they really mean is, I believe in it when you vote for the person I want. I don't actually believe in it. Well, likewise, the same sort of people say, we want parent feedback. But, they only mean they want certain kinds of parent feedback, like we liked the bake sale or something. They don't really want real parent feedback. And so can you say something a little bit more about the demonization of parents who objected to some of the stuff being taught? Because it got pretty intense over the past few years.
I mean, their favorite shtick was to call everything they don't like racist. They didn't like having to go back to work. And so they started calling parents who wanted to reopen schools racist. You had the Chicago Teachers Union. They deleted a tweet that actually said, quote, "The push to reopen schools is rooted in sexism, racism, and misogyny." I mean, they threw every freaking lefty buzzword at the wall to see what would stick. And they even had an interpretive dance video to protest going back to work. And let me tell you, you should go watch the video. It was embarrassing. If you were worried about the kids' math and reading test scores in Chicago, you should really be worried about their dance skills and their extracurricular activities as well. And they spent about $30,000 per kid. And guess what? The same union, their boss, Stacey Davis Gates, she went on CNN of all places this year and got roasted for 8 minutes straight for being a hypocrite on school choice. She opposed school choice every step of the way. She fought to get rid of their school choice program for low-income kids in Illinois this year. She even called school choice racist a couple of years ago and called private schools segregation academies. And guess what? It was uncovered this year that she sent her kid to a private school. Total hypocrite. If that's not a hypocrite, I don't know what is. They know that they know more than anybody else that the schools that they are running with the unions are a complete dumpster fire. And I don't blame them for choosing a private school. They know how horrible the government institutions are, but they shouldn't pull the ladder up from behind themselves, call everybody else racist for doing it, and then exercising educational opportunities for their own kids. So, I mean, this happened throughout the pandemic. You had people saying Like if you want to open the schools, you're just a murderer. You want to kill us. They had fake body bags outside the public school offices in D.C. where I was living at the time to protest reopening. You had fake caskets and coffins. In Arizona, they were instructing their members in the union to send a letter to the governor, Doug Ducey, and to include a fake obituary. They were teaching them, they can't teach anything else, but they can sure teach their members how to write fake obituaries and how to create tombstones. And they can teach them how to lie too, because in Arizona, they passed universal school choice in 2022. The unions tried to put it on the ballot to get another bite at the apple to try to undo it. They lied. They said they had 150,000 or so signatures to undo it. They only had like 80,000 signatures. So they were either liars trying to delay the implementation of the program to keep kids trapped in their schools as long as possible past count day so that they could get the money for those children. That's probably what happened. Or they were just really stupid. And if that's the case, they must have been doing Common Core math or something. But I don't want you teaching my children either way, whether you're a liar, a bad person, or whether you just can't figure out how to count. So, I mean, this has all just been, Tom, free advertising for school choice over the past 3 years straight. I mean, we're winning on the issue of school choice so much. I'm almost getting tired of winning. Almost, not really, because we haven't gotten to the blue states yet. But I talk about in the book how the revolution, yes, it's just in red states right now, but in blue states, it might come later through a term that I coined, a phrase that I coined called bipartisanship or nonpartisanship through hyperpartisanship. And I can explain that if you want, but I think it's a way that Democrats might come along as well, but not because we tell them use left-leaning arguments for school choice. That has never really convinced them because they care more about power than logic. What you need to do, as Milton Friedman once famously said, is the way that you change things is not about getting the quote-unquote right person into office. That can help, obviously, if they vote for freedom-advancing policies. But the way that you truly change things is about creating a climate of opinion where it becomes politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right thing. And I think we're starting to get there on the issue of school choice. I could go over some examples, but there are some Democrats defecting on the issue. Finally, stuff that I called in the book, it's happening now right before our eyes.
Well, just very quickly on this matter of the drive to reopen schools being rooted in racism and all the rest of it. I mean, I guess I could just state the obvious that Sweden was notorious for not closing the schools, and it's an overwhelmingly white country. Like, what were they really racist against America and that, like American blacks or something? And that was what the whole thing's crazy. It was just that the Europeans had a different experience. They were not as likely to close the schools or for as long or to mask toddlers or any of the other stuff. And we were just going on the basis of that evidence. And the funny thing is, these people half the time are lecturing us about why we should listen to Europe more. So, okay, let's go ahead and do it. Now, all of a sudden, they don't want to do it. So, first of all, best of luck to you, Corey, as you go out there and promote this and anger all the right people and cheer folks who could stand to be cheered after years of having their noses ground into the dirt. So the book, once again, The Parent Revolution, Rescuing Your Kids from the Radicals Ruining Our Schools, by our guest today, Corey DeAngelis. Thanks so much again, Corey.
Thank you so much, Tom.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Become a smarter libertarian in just 30 minutes a day. Visit TomWoods.com to subscribe to the show for free, and we'll see you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.